Let's get going. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I am Neil Barton from DB Visit. We're excited to have you join us to discuss a critical topic here for any organization leveraging Oracle technologies. That's saving money on Oracle licensing. But before we get started, we've got a couple of housekeeping items. The first one, we have translation services available for those that want to follow along in something other than English. So click on the show captions button down below and you choose the language you prefer and you can follow along there. Secondly, Q&A. We'll do Q&A at the end of the session here. However, as you have questions, just add them into the Q&A box at the as you go through the session, and we'll pick those up at the end. And finally, at the end of this, the recording will be provided to you via email. So here we go. So today's session, we've got License Fortress here, and they were founded to address the growing complexities and risks associated with licensing, particularly in Oracle technology. So we've got a couple of topics on today's agenda we'll work through. Understanding Oracle licensing costs. We'll break down the cost drivers for those. Optimizing database deployment. So discover the strategies to consolidate your databases, right size your CPU allocation, and minimize licensing costs there. Optimizing database, right sizing your database versions. Learn how to evaluate whether you should be on EE versus SE to achieve cost savings. What the trade-offs are, what the options are there. Evaluating Oracle features. Many organizations overspend on features they don't need. So how do we go about identifying those and avoiding those unnecessary costs? And then the final one before Q&A, we'll talk through understanding ULAs, right? What are the limits associated with those? How they can be flexible, but also there's unnecessary renewals and overcommitment. So understanding the trade-offs that come with the ULAs. And then we'll wrap with some Q&A. A little bit about us here at DB Visit. We're in the database disaster recovery space. We've been there for about 20 years. Started out doing Oracle and been doing that for 20 years, primarily on the Oracle Standard Edition platform. And we've also added support for Postgres and SQL Server over the last couple of years. However, the show today is not about us at all. It's about License Fortress and helping you understand and improve your cost effectiveness and administration challenges that come with a database. That's why we're thrilled to host this webinar with License Fortress, whose team brings many decades of experience in the Oracle space, particularly around Oracle licensing. And today we have Dean Bolton, who's a co-founder and chief architect. He's got a couple of decades with Oracle, so he knows his stuff. And with him, we've got Dr. Michael Corey, who has got 40 years of Oracle technology experience, and actually has been using it since version 3, which must make you one of the rare few there, Michael. I thought my version 6 was going back far enough, but version 3, that's impressive. But today,
it's funny, Neil, most people don't realize Oracle never had a version 1. There actually was only one product in the history of Oracle that was a version 1 that I recall. So version 2 is actually the first version.
Okay, well, excellent. But both these guys, many decades of experience, and they'll bring a wealth of knowledge in Oracle licensing, database optimization, and compliance. And they'll provide you with some great insights to help you better manage your Oracle environments and avoid costly mistakes. So with that, let's get started. So take it away, guys. I'll stop sharing and let you guys run the show. Looking forward to it.
Sounds good. Thanks very much, Neil.
No problem.
All right. Thanks everyone for taking the time to attend today. I hope we can provide some insights that let everyone know a little bit more about how Oracle licensing can be optimized and basically how you get the best value out of your money. But before we get into that, a little bit of background on us. Mike, you want to talk a little bit about our principles and how we started?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that VMware started approaching us early on to help VMware customers that Oracle was holding the soft partitioning policy over, claiming that they had to license every node of the VMware cluster, really scaring people away from or artificially raising the costs they need to pay for those VMware licenses. And so we started going in and helping customers. And when we entered the space, frankly, we didn't like what we saw. What we saw was technology that was 20 years old, that really didn't understand the cloud, And a lot of the options, software options, were endorsed by the vendors, misreporting or overstating what customers had to pay. And we saw licensed consultants that made more money off the licensed consulting from the licenses they sold than the advice they were given. And frankly, the advice was tainted. And so we really realized we could build a modern technology we call the Ox platform, which we'll discuss a little bit more, built an agentless technology in a really focused on security. And we could be independent. So we don't sell Oracle licenses, we don't sell Microsoft licenses, we don't make money off our referrals, and give people a true solution. And as we entered the market, people really gravitated. So really, the business problem is vendors like to audit companies, Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, to generate revenue. And in the decade we've been helping customers, we've yet to find anybody license compliant, which means we know they have a problem. And if it's dealt with proactively, we can make the problems go away meeting your contractual obligations. But if you wait till the vendor comes knocking on your door, now you've got the goalpost set at millions, hundreds of millions, or even more, and you have to reset the vendor's expectation of what they're going to make. So we really try to enter the market, giving people a solution to solve the problem and save them a lot of money. And I'll wrap up in this. Average engagement size, $50,000 US, based on size and complexity. Average savings, conservatively, we throw out the outliers, right, is over $3.2 million between license optimization and license compliance mitigation. So there's an enormous return on investment for our customers.
That's great, Mike. Thanks very much on that background there. Let's talk about some of the specifics around Oracle licensing, though, that we can then talk about how you optimize that, right? So a couple of key drivers for Oracle licensing. One, very simple, the total number of databases, right? In a lot of scenarios, more databases means you're going to have to buy more licensing. So you have to look at, how you're deploying those databases, what consolidation you can do, and we'll talk more about some of those options, wrapping it up at the end with a use case to show, just how effective some of these pieces can be brought together to help customers and users. Database versions are obviously very important. As Neil mentioned earlier, right? The Enterprise Edition is a very different price point just on the list price alone than the Standard Edition. I mean, you're looking at in US dollars, 47,500 for each Enterprise Edition license versus 17,500 for each Standard Edition license. So that's a huge difference in there before we even talk about the difference in how those are licensed. As Neil also mentioned, features. Mike brought this up as well. What features are you using in there? Do you need them from Oracle, or can you use a different vendor to provide the same functionality in there? Are you accidentally using features that you don't have licenses for, which can be a very substantial compliance gap in there? Unlimited license agreements. We'll touch on this more at the end as well, but can be a great way to get into Oracle, but can also have some long-term impacts in there. We'll touch on that in terms of, what the support costs are, how to get out of them, etc. Processor and core counts. As I mentioned before, huge list price difference between Standard Edition and Enterprise Edition, but it's multiplied by even more than that when you figure out the metric differences, right? Enterprise Edition is generally licensed on the cores. So if you have nowadays, very common to see two socket servers that have 24, 36 cores each in there. Standard Edition is still licensed based on the sockets, right? So, you're looking at cores being 36 or 72 for that system, whereas Standard Edition is only two sockets. Huge difference in cost in there to take into consideration. Virtualization and cloud deployments. As Mike mentioned, this is number one in here for why we got into this at the beginning. We see this all the time. Oracle has their soft partitioning policy and their cloud licensing policy, where they basically say if it's running in any of these areas where it can get extended, whether it's virtualized and you can move it to different clusters, whether it's cloud where you have maybe a constrained CPU instance that can be expanded, Oracle wants you to pay for it. They have a policy that says you have to pay for it. Contractually, you don't. And that's one of the big things we try to bring up with customers and just tell people in general. to look at the language of the contract because that's what's important in there. But that can be a huge driver of Oracle licensing costs. Um, Support and maintenance. For those of you that aren't aware, Oracle recently changed their annual uplift, their inflation cost on it from 4%, which was their historical norm, to 8%. Obviously, 8% increase each year adds up very quickly. And then again, the compliance risk, right? We've been doing this for over 10 years now as License Fortress. We've yet to see a customer that's fully licensed without license keys. As Oracle operates most of their products, it's very easy to make a compliance mistake about using features or having rogue installations that you don't have licensed.
Hey, Dean, I just want to add one thing. My last company was one of the first companies in the world to do remote database administration. It was common, well over probably 75% of the time, they would engage us and say, this is how many databases we have. The number was never right. We always found more databases. And so frankly, organizations didn't even, what management thought they had purchased and what was being deployed were night and day difference. And database features, you mentioned license keys, but the deck is stacked against organizations, right? We've come into organizations, found out Oracle's software patch invoked an unlicensed feature. We've seen third-party vendors invoke unlicensed features. We've seen, DBAs turning on things to make the backups faster, compression, not realizing or thinking, because it's not their job to worrying about licensing rules that keep changing. And so frankly, the deck is stacked up against the organizations unless they figure out a way to get control of it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. It's hard to do both of these things, right? As a DBA, it is hard to keep your eye on licensing while on your day-to-day tasks. As an aside, just an example of that, we had a customer yesterday that we helped with the licensing on. They have to deal with the modern issues today of ransomware. They got hit with a ransomware attack. So their DBAs are all scrambling to bring things back up, restore everything, you know, activate that DR plan that they've been testing and using in there. But now you fold in licensing in there, and that is an unfair burden for almost everybody in there. That's just too much to ask of a group to keep your eyes on both of those. So that's a great point, Mike. Mike, do you want to talk about the licensing survey that we had done?
Yeah, so every other year we pay a research firm to basically ask questions about the costs of software, survey on software audits. And this just came out in February of this year. And as you look at the data, it's sort of scary. 27% have rogue installations. Well, that mirrors to what I saw with that company I was running, right? Unlicensed features, 22%, 1 out of 5. The wrong license types. We've seen customers buy licenses from Oracle and then get audited being told they had the wrong license type because the salesperson didn't understand licensing themselves. I find the issues around virtualization at 13% surprising. I would have suspected the number would have been much higher, right? Customers not purchasing enough licenses. This thing is just packed with useful information. But the thing that's really scary, well, makes sense when you're in the business, is that software audits have yet again jumped up. They're more and more, right? Remember, the more audits a vendor does, the more revenue they generate, period. So software audits are yet another year, they're up.
All right. Hopefully we've done enough to kind of convey the complexity around Oracle licensing in here. But let's talk about now how we can make things better, right? So two things that we really try to drive home with any of our customers and just in general is how to optimize your database deployments from a technical side with some consolidation and reconfiguration strategies. One thing that we see all the time, and we'll talk about this in detail in our use case, is customers have been with Oracle for a long time, years, if not decades. Well, you made decisions when you first got into Oracle databases, 20 years ago, that would be very different if you started it again today. And technology has improved, right? 20 years ago, virtualization was in its infancy, right? Everything was spinning disk. There was no such thing as SSD or NVMe in there. So, all of the technology has changed a lot. And a lot of times what we find is customers aren't taking the step back to reevaluate their actual business needs. And we'll talk about that in the use case. But some of the things you can do when you take that step back is look at how you're using things, right? Since Oracle 12102, they've allowed for what's called pluggable databases in their container databases as a consolidation strategy. Now, they charged for it until version 19, when they started allowing you to do 3 pluggable databases within a container without having to buy the multi-tenant option and go up to Enterprise Edition for it. With version 21, you have to go to this container pluggable model. So it's an easy thing for customers to look at in there. If you have to make this change by version 21 to go to the CDB P2B model, can you then use the 3 limit in there to get better value out of there? Is there a good consolidation strategy for you by doing that? Right now, obviously, some trade-offs, right? If you patch the container, you're patching all the databases, the pluggables at the same time in there. So you have to consider that. But that's an easy way to kind of look at it and maybe get better value out of your database deployments in there.
Yeah, and I guess I'd add 2 things. First thing is you have to understand your entitlements. Old Oracle customers have the 10-day rule. Customers later got different variations of the 10-day rule. If you're an old customer, you have rights on certain databases where for 10 days you can run in any machine you want for backup and disaster recovery capabilities. Are you leveraging that? And then the second thing is you got to take a step back and really you got to understand your business requirements. What are my business requirements today? And am I using the appropriate set of technologies from Oracle and the appropriate set of technologies from other vendors, including hardware, right, strategies and virtualization that optimizes and meets those business requirements? And when customers do that, some surprising things come out. Gee, I can run on the standard edition for these applications, and I can get the disaster recovery I need from vendors like DB Visit and meet my business requirements and save a lot of money around the world. Of course, you got to navigate the gotcha, right? The Oracle repricing policy, which says if you drop something from a license set, right, you then reprice everything at then list price. But there are strategies for getting past that. And you can save substantial amount of money. In fact, our website is loaded with case study after case study on real customers and the way they've saved money taking this approach.
Yeah, I think you guys make a great point, right? Is that the old DBA, we made decisions 4 or 5 years ago around a set of technologies or infrastructure or capabilities that, while correct at the time, it don't make sense today because either infrastructure's improved, CPUs got faster, disks have got faster, or my business needs have changed. I don't need a set of capabilities, but we just pay the bill every year and we just don't think about it. So I think that's a really important point. So kind of like everything.
Other thing is the shiny nickel. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, my subscriptions, I just pay the bill. I don't even think about it. But there's a lot of money to be saved if you actually glance your eye over it every now and then and revisit whether you need it or not. Great point.
The other thing I'd add is I call it the shiny nickel, right? You see a shiny nickel, you want to pick it up. And I remember this when Oracle RAC first came out. I was one of the first 2 deployments of Oracle RAC in the world in a production environment. I was in a hospital. It made a lot of sense. But then every DBA wanted Oracle RAC in their resume, and they were finding use case. They were trying to figure out a way to get it inside their organization. And I'd argue that a third of those didn't really need Oracle RAC. It's great technology. I'm not knocking the technology, but we had a company that sold paint. Paint. Did they really need Oracle RAC? Was it really the end of the world? Right? Wasn't their point of sale system I'm talking about really was it the end of the world? And so you also have to get past the shiny nickel. Are we using technology because our technologists gravitate towards the latest and greatest? And does that, once again, I go back to, does that map to your business requirements?
Yep. I mean, that's a perfect example. One of the things I talk about often is that with RAC and Exadata, they are great technologies. But oftentimes it's the equivalent of an F1 car, right? Do you need an F1 car to go to the grocery store? Probably not, right? So it's about fitting your business requirements to the right product and technology in there. So all great points to keep in mind. Okay. One of the things we've been talking about, and I just want to really emphasize, is right sizing based on your database additions, right? Why reevaluate your database addition? Well, the answer to that is easy. The dollars, right? We've talked about it many, many times, right? Just on the face of it, Enterprise Edition is about 3 times more expensive than Standard Edition. When you factor in the metric difference of sockets versus cores, unless you're buying basically custom chips for your Oracle database that have really low core counts, you're looking at a 10 or 20x increase in price if you have to use Enterprise Edition or choose to use Enterprise Edition versus Standard Edition. So for all of you out there, this is one thing that we really suggest. Take a look at your needs. Do you really need Enterprise Edition, or can you go to Standard Edition in there? A lot of workloads out there can run just fine on lower cost editions without sacrificing performance, without needing any of those add-on features, with using third-party technologies to fit in to replace some of those feature needs that you might have used Oracle Enterprise Edition for previously.
And Dean, there's the hidden cost, software support and maintenance. You're
Mm-hmm.
rebuying those licenses every 4 years. Would you rather rebuy a license at 17,000 a core or rebuy a license at 47,000 a core? That's operational dollars that take away from other investments in the company.
Great point. Okay. Now, unfortunately, Oracle doesn't make it very easy to go from Enterprise Edition to Standard Edition. Standard to Enterprise, super simple, but the other way takes a little bit more work. So we put together a little bit of a scenario for you to kind of take a look at it. So one, you got to have your current baseline. So look at your current costs. As Mike said, that's your support in there. That's your original list price purchase in there. You have to have that to understand, is it worthwhile to make this transition from Enterprise Edition to Standard Edition? Two, take a look at your cost savings, right? So if you just look at your current hardware, look at the sockets versus the cores, multiply it by the list price in there, throw on a 30% discount, might be more, usually not less in there, and take a look. Is it going to be worth taking the next step in there? If that result, your current cost versus your savings is only, 10, 20, $50,000, maybe it's not worth it, right? For a lot of customers though, that cost savings difference could be $500,000, million, $2 million, et cetera. And that becomes real dollars, as Mike said, where it is worthwhile to take a look at it further. Next step, look at your business impact, right? It's going to take a little bit of work in there. I wouldn't advise anybody to just tear down their Enterprise Edition database, put the data back in a Standard Edition database, and go in production, right? That's a great way to have the whole project blow up and have a lot of tickets submitted, unhappy customers, upset internal business units. So look at the business impact, right? Are you using features of Enterprise Edition? How will you make those work if you downgrade to the Standard Edition in there? What other third-party technologies do you want to use? If you're using DataGuard, that's not available in Standard Edition. So do you want to use a tool like DB Visit in there to replace that if you do downgrade between the two? Next, step 4, look at the risk during the migration. This is really all about testing, right? Get those Standard Edition databases stood up, validate them. I hope you have KPIs in place, performance tools in place to make sure that everything will run as expected if you do make this change. And then you can make the decision in there and execute on the project. But just a helpful set of steps for you to go through if you are looking at how to switch from Enterprise to Standard Edition. Okay. Now, we've talked a bunch about all these different things in kind of generic terms. Let's talk about this in a real concrete way, how we were able to help a customer really get not only cost savings, but a much better operational process in place through a cloud transition that they did. Okay, so the scenario was we had a customer that was running on Oracle engineered systems, Oracle database appliances in there. Those of you who may know those are basically rack in a box, right? They're physical servers. They come in a very small footprint, 3U, 6U configuration in there. And you plug it in, you boot it up, and you basically have a rack database in there. So the customer was using these to meet their business needs. They had deployed it with Enterprise Edition. They were using partitioning in there. But because of the configuration around there, they basically had 2 different data centers running 2 different database appliances. One is an active, one is just a physical standby with DataGuard doing the replication between the two. So not only did they have the 2 engineered systems, they had 2 different data centers in there because of it in there. And they had Oracle and non-Oracle workloads that were not well integrated. And by that I mean, they had these 2 physical systems that were running Oracle Everything else they were running was on VMware, and they had different operational processes for disaster recovery between the two. Basically, they had the Oracle workload siloed because of the licensing and just physical challenges that they had in place.
Yeah, and I just would add, too often we see the licensing tail wagging the dog. People are deploying in these silos for fear of what's going to happen when Oracle comes knocking on the door. And frankly, from a virtualization perspective, there's nothing in the Oracle contract that says how you manage workloads in a virtualized environment or any environment. So really, it really is about understanding your entitlements and your rights and really saying, does maintaining two data centers that are siloed off from the entire rest of the business make sense operationally, never mind the inefficiencies, all because you're concerned about a licensing problem that can be circumvented pretty easily with other technologies?
Yep. And that's a great call out, Mike. That is exactly what was happening to this customer, right? They had everything else virtualized in there, and they didn't virtualize their Oracle environment because they didn't think they could. They didn't understand the licensing around it. They had been told incorrect details around that. They'd been bought into the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt around that partitioning policy.
Well, they're scared, right? Ultimately, they're afraid of what can happen. So that's where someone like License Fortress can come in and clear the air and get them on the right path.
Exactly. Yep. Great point, Neil. Um, so what we were able to do, one, we came in and explained to them exactly what Neil and Mike were talking about, right? The realities around Oracle licensing, that the contract is agnostic to virtualization. So you don't have to be concerned about that partitioning policy. Concern is not the right word. You do have to be aware of it because Oracle will try to enforce it, but it shouldn't bind all of your decisions in there. So what we did is we went in, helped them do a comprehensive assessment from their licensing. And then we help them take that step back that we've been talking about, right? Will standard edition work for you as opposed to enterprise edition? And they've been running on multiple releases of the ODAs for over 10 years in there. And really, when they took a look at it with the newer technologies that were in place and the improved processors, better SAN storage options in there, they could get away with running their workloads on standard edition without partitioning and still have the performance and responsiveness of their application to meet their customer needs as opposed to having enterprise edition. This really opened their eyes, right? So they were able to then take a look at, okay, how are we doing things overall? What they realized was that now, because they can run on standard edition, they don't need rack. They could actually get rid of not only their Oracle Database Appliance engineered system, but they could virtualize it and fit it back into their kind of overall general workflow, right? So they now have Oracle databases running as VMs handled in their comprehensive disaster recovery policy in there where they're using, they don't have these silos going on, right? And that allowed them not only to put everything together, which made operational sense for them, but then they were also able to get rid of that second data center entirely and move their DR into the cloud. And we were able to help them with that whole assessment and actually provide ongoing monitoring for them as well. Now, the big thing is, with those two data ODAs that they had before, they were using DataGuard between the two to keep it in sync because they still had some pretty tight RPO and RTOs on their DR requirements. So where was that going to come in from? Obviously, the answer is it came from dbVisit, right? They provided the disaster recovery for the non-enterprise edition databases that they migrated to. They have platform agnostic replication, so it wasn't a problem at all to go from an ODA to ODA now to with a virtualized database into a cloud environment. It helped them eliminate the need for costly secondary data centers and still met all of their DR requirements in terms of RPO and RTOs.
So one of the things I would reflect, so when we first entered the business and we'd explain to customers, you don't need to follow the soft partitioning policy. There's nothing contractual. They would say, well, who are you? And we'd say, well, look at the policy and go to the bottom of the page, not for contractual purposes. They say, but Oracle says we have to do this. And actually the customers were doing us a favor because we realized was, okay. And so we spent a number of years going out to an insurance company and educating them on this. And ultimately we call it Axe Protect. the ultimate service plan, which says if we issue you a certificate of compliance, Oracle, the vendor, comes in and doesn't agree with our version of the truth, specifically, let's say the partitioning policy, we'll defend it in a court of law. And if we were wrong, a large insurance policy will pay the bill for back licenses, right, and needed back support. So the answer is, at this point, we can guarantee a customer 100% that they're license compliant, regardless of what the vendor's saying. And we're the only ones in the Oracle industry that we're willing to back it with that financial guarantee and legal guarantee.
It's a great point, Mike. It allows you to have peace of mind around it, right? Nobody buys an Oracle database to become an Oracle licensing expert. You buy the database, one, because, and Mike will disagree with me on this, but it's the best RDBMS that's ever been created. He's got some love for SQL Server, blah, whatever. Oracle database wins in there. But you buy it because it's going to meet your business needs, whether that's for your internal business units or your end customers in there. You need all of the components of it to provide a good data store that's ACID compliant in there, but you're not there to deal with the company, right? You're not there to deal with the licensing issues. And so for customers that want it, it allows them peace of mind that they're in compliance and they don't have to worry about Oracle audits or any issues around the license compliance going forward.
Yeah, and if you look at this customer, right, they're using, in this case, DB Visit, 20-year-old technology. It's rock solid. They've saved substantial amount of money on their ongoing maintenance. They've saved substantial amount of money on the Oracle licensing. And in this case, they have a financial and legal guarantees that when Oracle comes knocking, we deal with the audit. And more importantly, they have complete peace of mind because we own the bill if for some reason we were wrong.
Let's just talk a second about those financial savings because they are not insignificant, right? This customer running on ODAs with Enterprise Edition was paying almost $250,000 a year in support costs across the Enterprise Edition software licenses, the ODA hardware support, the secondary data center, etc. Right? In year one alone, they were able to make this transition, which covered the expense of the migration. It covered the new standard edition licenses, and they even bought new hardware to support the virtualized infrastructure in there. All of that was covered by the savings on the software licensing alone, right? So year one, small savings, but it covered the whole migration in there. In year two, they've saved over 6 figures every year since they made this transition in there. And now they're able to, one, not only save the operational costs because everything's not siloed anymore, but two, they're able to take that money and use it for other projects, invest in new hardware refreshes, extend their line of business in there. Obviously, it's just a win overall because they're getting better value out of their Oracle licenses and they're more optimized from what they're spending with Oracle.
Wait. And more importantly, the operational savings of a team not having to deal with two different major infrastructures.
Yep, 100%.
That's a good point there too, right? You mentioned we downgrade to SE and make the savings, but there's that second order year-over-year savings that people tend to forget about, right? That little thing called support and maintenance.
Yep.
You keep paying every year, and that adds up. So that's a big savings.
Yep. As Mike said at the outset in here, it's 22% of your license cost. So basically every 4 years, you're rebuying those licenses. It can add up very, very quickly. And as we mentioned with this, a lot of those points. So not only on the licensing side, they saved over 90% by making the switch to Standard Edition 2 because of all the different components we talked about. But they were able to move their DR to Azure, which reduced their costs and increased their flexibility in there. They were able to get rid of that secondary data center, which reduced their disaster recovery costs by over 70%. I mean, just think about that's kind of one of the whole propositions of the cloud. You can have DB Visit replicating your on-premise into a small Azure instance in there, just enough to accept the changes in there. So, you're not having a like-for-like scenario in there. But if a disaster happens, you do the switchover, expand the instance with Azure because public clouds are meant to be burstable like that. And you can still process your production workloads in there. So, very powerful savings components in there and optimization components in there by using the cloud as opposed to having, passive disaster recovery environments. And then, making sure they're long-term compliant, right? We're monitoring their licensing compliance, DB Visits handling their disaster recovery continuity in there. So really a huge success story for this customer by taking really a step back and reevaluating these decisions that were made 20 years ago that were still impacting them today. So we've talked about it a bunch in here, but the big driver in there is Enterprise Edition gets you to these Enterprise Edition options in here. So one of the things we ask customers, what Enterprise Edition features are you using? Do you need them from Oracle, or can they be provided from somewhere else? Some of the top common ones are Active Data Guard, right? We talked about that in terms of doing your disaster recovery. Now, Active Data Guard allows you to get more value out of that DR, but do you need it, right? Does that meet your RPO and RTO DR times, or are there other technologies that can do it? Advanced security, encryption, huge issue, right? I just talked about a customer that we had that had ransomware in there. So a lot of emphasis on that cybersecurity and security and compliance in there. Does that need to come from Oracle? Are there other technologies, encryption methodologies that can come into play? Same thing with partitioning and advanced compression, right? Do you need the Oracle feature, or does a alternative provide the same meet your business needs in there? At the same time, beware of using features that you're not licensed for or not even aware of, right? Diagnostic and tuning pack are probably number one and number two. They make it way too easy to be used. But then you have a lot of the other Enterprise Edition features and options as well, multi-tenant, advanced security, partitioning, etc. So really take a look at what you're using when you go through that process of evaluating whether you look at downgrading to standard edition or just in general, making sure that you're getting the best value out of your Oracle licensing.
And back to that survey, 1 out of 5 customers were using unlicensed features in the survey.
Mhm. By default, if you go through the Oracle Database Creation Assistant, it puts everything in there, right? So it'll install with all of these features, regardless whether you have licenses or not. And then, basically DBA, developer beware on activating those features in there. Now, some of those you can disable if you use like a custom database template, which we highly recommend to our customers. Some of them, like advanced compression, you can't. The system needs it in there. And so it becomes very difficult to avoid accidental usage of options like that.
So we've got a question that came in right on time, so maybe we'll just ask it now. Is it possible to manually deactivate a feature when we don't use it anymore? For example, advanced compression.
That's a great question, Neil. Perfect timing. So it depends on the feature. Advanced compression, no, right? That is one that is needed by Oracle system internals. So there's no way to deactivate it. You just have to be vigilant about making sure that you don't use it anyway. Other ones, though, you can definitely turn off, right? In there. So you can deactivate partitioning. You can deactivate a number of the other ones and make sure they're not installed in there. Again, some of this is with how you install the Oracle binary. Some of this can be done with custom database templates in there, but it really becomes a kind of a feature by feature basis for whether or not it can be done and how you exactly deactivate it.
Cool. Perfect. Thanks for that.
Mhm. Finally, one of the things we want to talk about is ULAs, right? Unlimited license agreements in here. And so a lot of the pros and some of the pros and a lot of the cons around that. For those of you that don't know, unlimited license agreement with Oracle is basically an unlimited usage of the Oracle products, and you negotiate with Oracle what products are on there. Oftentimes it's database and a lot of the features in there for a certain time period, often 30 or 36 months in there. And so you basically enter an agreement with Oracle. You get to deploy as much of it as you want. And then 36 months down the road, the bill really comes due, because then you have an option of either certifying and basically telling Oracle, okay, I'm using 100 processor licenses of these products in there. And then at the end of that, it converts. So then you have a limit of 100 processor licenses to use in there. And additionally, once you agree to that ULA, your support is fixed as well. So at the end of that process, if you're using 10 licenses or you're using 10,000 licenses, your support cost has already been set, and it's the same each year with the 4 to 8% uplift that goes on top of it. So it can definitely be an easy benefit at the outset that has a long-term cost and impact in there. What we see oftentimes is customers who are just renewing their ULAs over and over again because they, don't have track of how they're using their licenses or don't understand how to certify and what the implications are. So there's a lot of issues that you have around that. But again, it can be a very complicated scenario in there that you have to make sure you know what you're doing, getting into, and oftentimes can be beneficial to get out of as opposed to just renewing over and over again.
So you'll find this stat interesting. About 80% of the time when we come in and engage with a customer who has an ULA, we do the math. 80% of the time, it's in their best interest to exit out, certify out. All right. Then we have one company we were negotiating with. The ULA was well over 50 million a year. All right. And they were saying, well, let's use Oracle's soft partitioning policy and maximize the exit of our ULA. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't artificially inflate all the licenses you get on the exit of the ULA and then say up the road, well, I don't want to follow the policy because I don't agree with it. And so there's real dangers. I would say to you that engage somebody like a License Fortress, obviously. We hope it's us, but we have an ULA guide on our website. It's pretty comprehensive to give you a sense. And then the other thing is geographical limitations is an important one, or even when you get acquired, what happens with the ULA. You have to think about these things. Or if you acquire a company, can you include them in your company's ULA? And so these are complex agreements. They have very specific rules, and you really have to understand them so that if you do decide you're in that 80% case you want to exit out, you maximize the value you got out of that ULA legitimately without creating some of the gotchas.
Yep. And understanding those gotchas that happen between those two, right? Because one thing that we highlight and is in the ULA guide that Mike was talking about is that the terms are different between the two.
Oh,
In the ULA, it's where the Oracle programs are installed and running. Outside of the ULA, it's the standard terms of installed and or running. And that and or is a big difference. So a lot of customers can immediately exit out of the ULA and find themselves out of compliance if they're not careful. So it is a complex thing, but as Mike mentioned, the biggest thing is 80% of the time we find that if you take the steps to do it properly, it makes financial sense to get out of these ULAs.
and by the way, Oracle knows that gotcha about how the license rules change. And so this is identified as an audit trigger. I'm not saying you're going to get an audit guaranteed. What we're saying there's a higher likelihood that you will be on the audit list. And in that annual survey, by the way, you have a 41% chance of being audited by Oracle from the people reporting every 3 years. So you really have to plan for these audits.
All right.
Excellent. Well, thanks, guys. Lots of good input there. Lots of things for people to think through. Right sizing and getting advice and help on the license is important, right? The ROI is substantial if you do it right. So at this point, I got a question. Feel free to throw any more questions in the Q&A box. While we do that, I'm going to start up a quick poll, and we'll see if we can get the poll going. Come on. So we've got a poll going. While we do that, we'll got a couple questions. So let's start with the first one, guys. Any dramatic changes in the licensing for 23 AI that you know about?
That's a good question in there. Licensing wise, I don't believe so in there. I mean, obviously very slow rollout to allow 23 AI to be available in there, but I don't believe there's been a huge amount of changes in the licensing terms. Honestly, there haven't been a huge amount of changes in the licensing terms since the last real big one was with 12.102, where they switched the standard edition and standard edition 1 licenses to SE2 licensing. They do always play around with the features in there. I mean, they got rid of advanced analytics as a feature. They allowed customers to use 3 pluggables without needing multi-tenancy as a feature in there. So there's little changes in there, but nothing major particular to 23 AI is jumping out.
And just add one more thing, just because even though it's not in the question, There is a major licensing change, and hopefully you're aware of it. January 23rd of was it 2023, Oracle changed its licensing model for Oracle Java,
Hmm.
where you must license every employee. And Oracle's definition of an employee is quite broad. So if you were working with License Fortress, you'd have to license all our employees. Um, and basically, if one employee needs a commercial use license, when Oracle audits you, you're supposed to pay for every employee and they attempt to go back in time. So just be aware, get your Java house in order.
Yeah, cool. Good points there. What about, let me see here. What can be said about virtualization with KVM as a strategy to optimize licensing cost?
So a common thing in there. Well, the first thing I'd say is, does KVM meet your business needs? Or are you choosing KVM because of licensing confusion, right? Again, remember, the Oracle contract is agnostic to virtualization, right? So you can license on KVM just like you license on VMware, just like you license on premise. It makes no difference. You have all the tools in your bag to control where those Oracle workloads are installed and or running. As long as you do that, you can use any technology. There's no difference in there. But we do have a number of customers who use KVM, can be used. Oracle does treat it a little bit nicer, especially if you follow some of their hard partitioning uh, uh, policy recommendations and rules in there. So it is there, but I would take a look at it from the perspective of one, does it meet your business needs? And two, are you choosing it over a different technology because of licensing confusion?
Okay, great, thanks. Let me see, working through the list. There's an interesting one. See if you guys have anything off the top of your head, but certainly one we can follow up later. Yeah, when I go from EE down to SE, you know, someone's asking which tools can replace the features for Enterprise Edition, such as parallelism, diagnostics, and tuning. Obviously for Active Data Guard, standby is available to do that. But as
Yep.
we transition down, obviously as an organization, you've got to think through how do I accommodate these other capabilities that EE provided with tools that are out there in the market that would account for SE. Certainly
Yep.
we've got a large customer base that can be achieved. But do you guys have anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, a couple. I mean, there's so many features in there. Going through each one would there could be a whole nother webinar on there. For the performance piece of it, right? With diagnostic and tuning, you can use Oracle does have still a free tool of Stats Pack that you can use and install and run to do it yourself in there. There's other third-party tools in there. Off the top of my head, SolarWinds comes to mind as being a good option for that. There's a tool called DB Marlin out there that's good. I think there's a lot of ones out there that'll help you get those performance details that you need without having to buy diagnostic and tuning in there. Parallelism, not jumping out to me in there. You do have a limitation on backup, so sometimes you can work that around in terms of how you do your backup scripts in there. But it really does come down to exactly what features you're talking about and how you want to meet the business requirements.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Pretty just tacking onto that because it's a separate question, but specifically on anything around Database Vault when I moved down to SE, have you seen any tools or solutions that customers provide for that?
That's a good one. I'll be honest, we don't see Database Vault used that much to begin with, so and
Okay.
nothing's jumping out for me in terms of what would replace it. Sorry, but I can look into that and get back to you.
Cool. And downgrading from EE to SE, is a data pump export import the only way? Is the last question we have today.
Um, no, you can. There are other ways to do it. You can do it with a binary change in there. There are some limitations around the database not using data pump or import export in there. Oracle does have notes in my Oracle support on how to do it in there, but I think the most common way is definitely to do import export, or sorry, export import in there. The other advantage of it is by doing that, you're just taking your data across, and any historical information, any compliance issues that you might have had in the past, are also don't have to be transferred over in that methodology. So there are some alternatives, but I would say the majority of customers do the export import.
Okay, great, excellent. Well, I think we've covered everything for today. Appreciate the time, guys. Yeah, for those people attending, thank you again for your time. I know everyone's busy, and you will get a copy of this recording through email. And if you have any questions we didn't answer or anything that pops in your head after the session, Michael and Dean and License Fortress will be happy to help on that side. And obviously, we here at DB Visit will be happy to answer any questions you have as well. So appreciate everyone's time and have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.